whatever they wish and that they desire. They won't build, they won't live, they won't be doing what they're doing materialistically. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created in them these evidences to, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will, He could have made the earth like Jannah. You wish for something, it comes to you like this. But this is not how the earth is created. This is not how the human being is created. And you can wish whatever you want to wish, but that's the reality. Right? People can live in a wishful thinking, and that's why when they think of religion, they think of religion as some spirituality and some good feelings. And if you get the good feelings, this is religion. If it's something that requires to struggle and to strive, then the religion will twist and change to fit his desire. That's not religion. So as always they say, if a person would make the tadbir and the tadbir to maintain, to live our life, if you make this tadbir to the deen, the same way that people do for the dunya, see what the people did in the dunya and how excelled themselves when they deal with the dunya. If they would, of course, the deen is more even important than all of this. But if they give that same concern and the focus and the mujahada and the struggle and the striving for the deen, how would they be? And alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not command the people to struggle with matters of deen more than what they do for the dunya. Right? The matter is very simple when it comes to the obligations. So what is it a month, a year for a person to fast? If he has the ability even. If he doesn't have the ability, there is expiations and there is way out. What is it for a person to pray 5 daily salah every day, but to perfect it, not just to do it, but to perfect 5 daily salah, that it doesn't take much. And staying away from what is khabith and what is filth. But the shaitan, he adorns and he promises evil and promises all kinds of false things. So without al-mujahada, there is no success, there is no goodness whatsoever. وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, those who, الَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا, those who struggle in our path, we will guide them to our way. And this is, in Mecca was revealed. And the same thing, وَجَاهِدُهُمْ بِهِ جِهَادًا كَبِيرًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, with the Qur'an, make jihad with the Qur'an towards them. That means struggle and convey the message. Right? This is not talking about fighting or physical fighting or anything. It's about the struggle within ourselves and to be patient with the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If it's left to our own optional decisions, many of us will fail. Right? So that's why it's by the mercy of Allah that something like the month of Ramadan, you have no choice, but you have to struggle. This is mercy in itself. And it shows the beauty of the deen of Islam. You are like, تُسَاقُ إِلَى اللَّهِ سَوْقًا, as they say. You are being dragged, if it's correct to say, right? To be among the people of taqwa. You are being dragged to enjoy the beauty of the deen. You have to get over your own nafs. And that's why when the fasting, and especially when you put the two combinations together, the fasting and the Qur'an, two areas to struggle with, and the word struggle, I guess sometimes it gives a negative feelings, to strive with your own self, right? The Siyam and the Qur'an are two beautiful things. But because of many other reasons, the filth in our own self and our own hearts and laziness and desire, to overcome this, to do two simple acts on a daily basis in 30 days. And leave the matter to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and be sincere in your ibadah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Fasting and the Qur'an. And that's why both are mentioned in the hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, that as-siyam wal-Qur'an yashfa'ani al-'abd. Both fasting and the Qur'an, they intercede for the slave of Allah in the Day of Judgment. As-siyam will speak. And the belief of the people of Ahl Sunnah, if the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam said, as-siyamu yaqul, that means fasting will say this in the Day of Judgment. How? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Al-Baqarah wa Al-Imran, they come in the Day of Judgment as two clouds. Yes, they come as two clouds. We don't distort the meanings. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is able to do all things. So as-siyam will say in the Day of Judgment, مَنَعْتُهُ الطَّعَامَ وَالشَّرَبِ, I deprived them from eating and drinking, all for the sake of Allah. فَشَفِّعْنِي, make me intercede for him. And Al-Qur'an, which did not say the night prayer, Al-Qur'an. Al-Qur'an would say, وَنَعْتُهُ النَّوْمَ, أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام, that means I deprived them from sleep. So and to be relaxed and so on. This is what the Qur'an does to the person which comes into the action of the night prayer. So they both will intercede for the person. So this is two main things to be doing in the month of Ramadan, but not, again, according to our own desire, since you're the most important of it with fasting. So then, and that's why a person, a Muslim, if he has the ability, he does not question himself or have any doubt or weaknesses that during the day of fasting, should I break my fast or not? That's too much, it's too tough. You don't even, that question doesn't come into your heart. In which the optional fasting, yes, sometimes the whole day. Until it's Asr time, for example, if you're at work and you're fasting, or should I break my fast? The food smells good, the coffee smells good, all of these types of things, everybody is eating, because you have an option to break your fast. But when you lose hope in something, in many cases it's better for you. You have only one choice. So this is by the mercy of Allah to overcome this laziness that we have, that makes the person, the strongest person on the face of earth, makes things easy in everything and every aspect in our life, if we fulfill the acts of obedience and ubudiyyah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But then what is left is something very easy to struggle. Make it a perfect fasting, make it a good night prayer. Whatever is left as to perfect the action is much easier than the original act itself. And it's all by the mercy of Allah. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us among those who defeat the evil within their own selves and to seek help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Inshallah, we'll have the dars in a few minutes, inshallah. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We'll continue inshallah ta'ala with the book of Akhlaq, Hamalat al-Qur'an, the manners of the people of the Qur'an and those who not just memorize, but the people that are those who act upon the Qur'an. And it should be something that the entire ummah of the Prophet ﷺ are upon this. They're either scholars and ulama, or those who would ask the scholars and follow the ilm and follow the knowledge based on the Qur'an and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and text and revelation from Allah to give us this encouragement. And we should not make our share of goodness only in being encouraged. Right? To attend a session or even sessions of ilm in itself is such a virtuous thing, and it's a great reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for someone to seek the knowledge of the Qur'an and the Sunnah, but to apply it with the intention to have it in our life, and not just to teach it to others, but to have it in our lives first, and then to extend that benefits to others, which is like the zakah of the ilm. But not to make the only thing that we do of goodness is hearing about goodness. We need to implement this goodness that we hear. So we talked about the virtue of Hamalatul Qur'an and the virtue of those who, we talked about many of the evidences there, and then we talked maybe 7 or so narrations that he mentions in 2 short chapters, which is فضل من تعلم القرآن وعلمه, the virtue, the superiority of the one that learns the Qur'an and teaches it to others, and فضل الاجتماع في المسجد لدرس القرآن, and the reward and the superiority of الاجتماع, to get together in the masjid for the dars of Al-Qur'an. Then after that he will talk about the akhlaq Ahl al-Qur'an, which inshallah ta'ala will do that tomorrow inshallah ta'ala. And still the book is not yet halfway, but inshallah ta'ala we can continue it later. And everything leads to the second thing. So it's always, as we said yesterday, they were very truthful in their learning. So they would learn and they apply and they go to the next, and so on. In our times, we tend to learn so much, and the action sometimes is lacking, right? Which we need to, if we have the opportunity to learn, because Allah knows best when we will be, wal'ayadhu billah, maybe deprived of it. So a person, whenever he gets a chance to learn, he should not say, let me apply first and learn. No, keep on learning, and then at the same time, the concern is, and the truthfulness is to apply what we learn and to purify ourselves. So here, باب فضل من تعلم القرآن وعلمه, the reward of the one that learns the Qur'an and teaches it to others, and it's probably narrations that we all heard before. But the more you learn or you hear the same aspect of ilm, if you really, truly hear it with your heart and learn the meanings of it, it doesn't get old when you hear it all the time, because if it's correct to say, it can register in different ways. And the more you hear it, the more benefits you get. And that's why always the ulama, they say, if you finish a book and you study it with the alim, you can study the same book 10 times more. And every time you study it, you'll have a different perspective, not a completely different perspective, but you add to it in another level of ilm. And the heart is amazing in this matter, and the more you gain the knowledge, the more you would relate things from the same text and from the same narrations that we hear. The first one, and I just read the chain of narrations. حدثنا أبو شعيب عبد الله بن الحسن الحراني قال أخبرنا علي بن الجعد قال أخبرنا شعبة عن علقمة بن مرثد قال سمعت سعد بن عبيدة يحدث عن أبي عبد الرحمن السلمي عن عثمان بن عفان رضي الله عنه. And these two, Abu Abdurrahman al-Sulami is famous of, there's always a quote that is mentioned when Abu Abdurrahman al-Sulami is mentioned. He says that they took the Qur'an, قرأنا القرآن, we recited the Qur'an, we learned the Qur'an from Uthman ibn Affan and others, 10 ayat, 10 verses at a time. This is how they received the Qur'an from the Sahaba. They would learn it and they would study it and they would act upon it, and then they go to the next set of verses or 10 verses. This is Abu Abdurrahman al-Sulami. And he says, عن عثمان ibn Affan رضي الله عنه قال ذو النورين رضي الله عنه, he said, قال شعبة قلت له, he said, I said to him, عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. Shu'bah, the narrator from Abu Abdurrahman al-Sulami, he said, actually Shu'bah comes before, he did not ask Abdurrahman al-Sulami, he asked Alqamah. He asked him, عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. Uthman ibn Affan said, and he's going to say what he said. He asked him, did he say that from the Prophet ﷺ, or he's from his own self? He said, قال نعم, yes, from the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام. He heard this from the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام. قال خيركم من تعلم القرآن وعلمه. The best among you are those who learn the Quran and teach the Quran. So خيركم, then he says قال أبو عبد الرحمن, Abu Abd al-Rahman al-Sulami, he said فذلك أقعدني مقعدي هذا فكان يعلم من خلافة عثمان إلى إمرة الحجاج. He said, this is what made me sit in my position that I'm sitting now, is this hadith. And he says, and then he used to teach from the Khilafah of Uthman radiallahu anhu all the way to when the Hajjaj became a leader. So the hadith, خيركم من تعلم القرآن وعلمه. خيركم. And there are some hadith that talks about this khayriyya or the goodness, and the goodness is exclusive in this ummah. And in this ummah, the more the person excel himself, he will be the best among the best of the best. So تعلم القرآن, learning the Quran, and when a person is in the process of learning, he is from the best. And when he learns with the intention of lifting himself from ignorance, first and foremost, and also with the intention to be of a benefit to others, but sincerely for the sake of Allah, not seeking anything from them. And even if a person wants to learn, but maybe because of the lack of knowledge, his intentions is not sincere for the sake of Allah, still learn. As some of the Salaf, they said, تعلمنا العلم لغير الله فأبى الله إلا أن يكون له. When they were young maybe, or children, he said, we learned the knowledge not for the sake of Allah, the beginning. Because when a person in the beginning, he might be ignorant, he less knowledge and so on. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the meaning of the statement, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, أبى الله إلا أن يكون له, that he did not will anything but for it to be for his sake. So a person can change, the more you learn the ilm, right? What's the benefit of the ilm? That it would purify the hearts and would make the person then change his intentions and make it for the sake of Allah. And this is with any good deeds. Don't question that, maybe I'll do this to show off and so on. If it's a good deed, you know for sure that it's a good deed, do it and seek help from Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will change one's intention. So, من تعلم القرآن وعلمه. And تعلم القرآن is anything that has to do with the Quran. It is not just reciting, it's reciting, memorization, tafsir, the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, the ulum, the sciences that helps for the person to study, foundation of ilm, even the lugha, the language, the ulum al-ala that helps the person to understand the Quran and the sunnah, and all of the different sciences of sharia is based on the Quran and the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So all of that comes under this category. And the goal of all of this is to apply the Quran in our life and to act upon it. And he mentioned the same narration, but from Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu. He says, حدثنا أبو جعفر أحمد بن يحيى الحلواني قال أخبرنا فيض بن وثيق قال أخبرنا عبد الواحد بن زيد عن عبد الرحمن بن إسحاق عن النعمان بن سعد عن علي بن أبي طالب رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم خيركم من تعلم القرآن وعلمه. And see how the tabi'i, he heard this, then he took this upon himself. He learned it from the best generation, the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, and then he would teach the people, and this is how the ilm goes from one generation to the other, and we should struggle to keep it that way, and that's why the next chapter in the masjid, and that should be something that never to be exchanged by anything else. And with whatever means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it for us, then definitely we should choose, but without undermining the goal and the role of the masjid. He says then after that, حدثنا أبو خبيب العباس بن أحمد البرتي قال عبد الله بن معاوية الجمحي قال أخبرنا الحارث بن نبهان قال أخبرنا عاصم بن بهدلة عن مصعب بن سعد عن أبيه قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم خيركم من تعلم القرآن وعلمه. Another narration. So he said قال وأخذ بيدي فأقعدني في مجلسي أقرئ. Then he took me with my hands and he made me sit in my majlis to read the Quran. This hadith actually is, as the ulama they say, is munkar as far as the chain of narrations, but anyway, the authentic ones already, we heard it before. And then he says afterwards, حدثنا أبو الفضل جعفر بن محمد الصندلي قال أخبرنا زهير بن محمد قال أخبرنا عبد الله بن يزيد المقرئ قال أخبرنا موسى بن علي بن رباح قال سمعت أبي يقول سمعت عقبة بن عامر. I heard عقبة بن عامر رضي الله عنه says يقول خرج إلينا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ونحن في الصفة. The Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام came out unto us while we are by the Sufa. And the Sufa, as we know, the fuqara, the poor companions of the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, لا أهل لهم ولا مال. They don't have any family or wealth. They come from different parts and they want to be with the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام. And they stayed in the back of the masjid and they didn't have any, much, to the extent of which is even their garments that they wear. Some of them, when they make sujood, it might even expose their awrah because of the lack of things that they have. And the Sahaba would take every time someone with them to feed them. And this was a temporary situation for them. They were in such a poor need. So he said, فقال, the Prophet ﷺ went to them and he said to them, أيكم يحب أن يغدو إلى بطحان أو العقيق فيأتي كل يوم بناقتين كوماوين الكوماء الناقة العظيمة السنام زهراوين فيأخذهما في غير إثم ولا قطع رحم. He said to them, and we probably heard this hadith many times, who among you would love to go to Buthan or Al-Aqiq, which is right outside of Al-Madinah, not too far, where you make the miqat when you're going from Medina to Mecca for the Umrah or Hajj. فيأتي, and he would come back every day, بناقتين كوماوين, with two huge, good, the best camels, with the best and the biggest hump. I mean, it's the most expensive. فيأخذهما, and he would take them, bring them back without a sin and without severing a relationship. Halal, pure, and it's yours, and you would do that every day. قلنا كلنا يا رسول الله يحب ذلك. All of us, O Messenger of Allah, love that. And they're poor and they're in need, and the Prophet ﷺ, the best teacher ever. Right? And he's asking them such a question that touches them and touches their needs. And as they always mention, what is two camels? You might not relate to it. Camels till today, they're very expensive anyway. Right? So if you want to have two camels, don't belittle two camels. It's huge. But the camels at their time is the transportation, and it's the sign of someone that is wealthy. So think of two means of transportation that are expensive in our lifetime, whatever it's cars or whatever. And these people, they're very poor. So they said, we all love to be like that, the Prophet of Allah. He said, فَلَأَنْ يَغْدُوَ أَحَدُكُمْ إِلَى الْمَسْجِدِ فَيَتَعَلَّمَ آيَتَيْنِ مِنْ كِتَابِ اللَّهِ خَيْرٌ لَهُ مِنْ نَاقَتَيْنِ وَثَلَاثٌ خَيْرٌ لَهُ مِنْ ثَلَاثٍ وَأَرْبَعٌ خَيْرٌ لَهُ مِنْ أَرْبَعٍ وَمِنْ أَعْدَادِهِنَّ مِنَ الْإِبِلِ. فَلَأَنْ يَغْدُوا. After he asked them and after they gave the answer, then he directed them to what is best for them. That for one of you to go, al-ghudu is normally refers to going out in the morning, which shows the diligently, and this is the work that a person do. For you to go to the masjid, فَيَتَعَلَّمْ, to learn آيَتَيْن, two verses from Kitabillah, from the book of Allah, خَيْرٌ لَهُ مِنْ نَاقَتَيْن, is better for him than the two camels. وَثَلَاثٌ خَيْرٌ لَهُ مِنْ ثَلَاثٍ, and three is better than three. وَأَرْبَعٌ خَيْرٌ لَهُ مِنْ أَرْبَعٍ, and four is better than four. وَمِنْ أَعْدَادِهِنَّ مِنَ الْإِبِلِ, and with the numbers of the camels. Then you can go on and on with this. And it's al-khayriyya here, or what is best or better than the camels, without showing even the limits of the goodness. You might say this is better for you, but with extra or so much that you cannot comprehend. This is so much that you cannot comprehend. But how the Prophet ﷺ directing them and purifying their hearts, and a person would say, well, why didn't he tell them to go work and seek provisions and things like this? There's other hadith that talks about this, and there's no contradiction whatsoever. And it's only for those who have problem in their understanding and maybe the lack of knowledge that someone might misunderstand these types of the hadith. It's not the hadith, it's the individual. So for someone to say he should direct them to go seek provisions, already we have that. Right? And even if that is not mentioned, someone with proper understanding, he would understand from this, yes, yeah, go seek provisions and so on, but what the Prophet ﷺ is the foundation of this. So if you go seek provisions to suffice for yourself, right, make your heart well established on the fact that two verses is better than two camels, three is better than three, like this. So why do you seek provisions? Why do you want to physically work? So that you apply this, because this is the purpose. This is the foundation of all things. So the wealth becomes the mean and not a goal in itself. So it's a beautiful hadith that shows the reward of learning, and the previous ones about learning and teaching. And the Qur'an was revealed in the Arabic language, and if it's just about language, they were very well versed in the language. So what is learning then? The two verses from the Qur'an that requires learning. So it's not about the recitation of the Qur'an only, or not even memorizing the Qur'an only, but to understand what the verses means based on the other narrations and based on the ilm that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, and to act upon it. And this is what is best for them. The next chapter, which also 2-3 narrations, باب فضل الاجتماع في المسجد لدرس القرآن, the virtue of being gathered in the masjid for the dars of the Quran, and the famous hadith of the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام. He mentioned it with more than one narration. He says حدثنا الفريابي قال أخبرنا إسحاق بن راهوي قال أنا جرير يعني ابن عبد الحميد عن الأعمش عن أبي صالح عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه عن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال ما تجالس قوم في بيت من بيوت الله يتلون كتاب الله ويتدارسونه بينهم إلا حفت بهم الملائكة وغشيتهم الرحمة وذكرهم الله في من عنده ومن أبطأ به عمله لم يسرع به نسبه. ما تجالس قوم, there is the other narration ما اجتمع قوم, right? This is the famous one ما اجتمع قوم. As long, every time people are gathered, الاجتماع, to get together, في بيت من بيوت الله, in one of the houses of Allah. Here ما تجالس قوم gives you a little slightly different or more benefit. ما تجالس قوم, تفاعل is that you would call one another to come and sit. So it's not that it happened, they all of a sudden find themselves in the masjid and then they find themselves sitting doing halaqah of the Quran. No, there is effort that was done. They called one another, they planned, let's go to the masjid, let's, like this. ما تجالس قوم, they ask one another to sit in the masjid and to study the book of Allah. في بيت من بيوت الله. Doing what? يتلون كتاب Allah. They're reciting the book of Allah. And we said about the recitation, for people to sit together and just to recite the Quran together, one after the other like this, that's not from the Sunnah. And as Imam Al-Nawawi rahimahullah, he mentioned it in his book of At-Tibyan or so. If you want to sit and listen to the Quran, sure, sit as a gathering and bring one of you to recite and you listen. MashaAllah, this is good. Sitting, listening to the Quran. Many people, they don't do that. And some of them, they do it with the bid'ah, Allah, and things like this. This is if you sit together and someone is reciting Quran and you sit and listen to the Quran or following the recitation, this is a good thing. But just one after the other to recite just for the sake of reciting like this and to go as a halaqah like that, and unless it's for something else other than reciting, like learning, correcting one's recitation, then this is a good thing. So if you sit in a circle of a Quran and someone is correcting the recitation of others, this is a good thing. And with the intention, of course, of following the Quran. And then وَيَتَدَارَسُونَهُ بَيْنَهُمْ. يَتَدَارَسُونَهُ بَيْنَهُم, that means this is more than just the reciting. That means they are studying it together. And the word يَتَدَارَسُون أو المدارسة, which is mentioned also in the hadith of Jibreel when he comes to the Prophet ﷺ in Ramadan, يُدَارِسُهُ الْقُرْآنِ, and one of the narrations, يُعَرِضُهُ الْقُرْآنِ, that means he presents the Quran to him and he recites, Jibreel ﷺ recites, and the Jibreel ﷺ correcting the Prophet ﷺ. Even the ulama, they said with the qira'at was established in the last arda, in the last presentation of the Quran, in the year that the Prophet ﷺ died. So all of that was presented in this meeting with Jibreel alayhi salam. So وَيَتَدَارَسُونَهُ بَيْنَهُمْ, to study and to learn and to benefit from the Quran. So all of that is a duty to be done. إِلَّا حَفَّت بِهِمُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ, unless if they do that, the angels would surround them. And إِلَّا حَفَّت, that means it's always attached. If they do this, this is what's going to happen. It does not get separated. إِلَّا حَفَّت بِهِمُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ, the angels would surround them. وَغَشِيَتْهُمُ الرَّحْمَةُ, and the rahmah would cover them. Al-ghashiyah is when a person is completely covered. وَغَشِيَتْهُمُ الرَّحْمَةُ وَذَكَرَهُمُ اللَّهُ فِي مَنْ عِنْدَهُ, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would mention them with those who are with Allah. The best gatherings, the angels. And this is a great virtue that you can really find in any other actions, especially when people are together. And then the Prophet ﷺ said something interesting afterwards by saying, وَمَنْ أَبْطَأَ بِهِ عَمَلُ لَمْ يُسْرِعْ بِهِ نَسَبُ. وَمَنْ أَبْطَأَ بِهِ عَمَلُ his action. أبطأ, البطء is when you go slow. So whoever his actions make him slow, that means the action supposed to make us surpass everyone, so supposed to make us going ahead into as if we are traveling or in a situation where you're going somewhere, and your actions is the fuel, is the means of going forward. So when a person, his action is making him, slowing him down in what? In seeking the pleasure of Allah, in the path of Allah, into the Jannah of Allah. Think of a sirat, when people will cross the sirat, and the speed that they have on the sirat, the less they have speed, the more they would get from the hellfire, and some of them would fall into the hellfire. All of that is according to their actions. The actions is the zad, is the provisions that would get them to be on the sirat. Some of them would fast like a blink of an eye, and like the wind, and so on, according to their actions. So the actions, it's supposed to make us like this. وَسَارِعُوا وَسَابِقُوا. Be in haste, be in race with one another, with one's actions. And if you're able that no one on the face of earth will be better than you in actions, then do so. And this is how they used to compete with one another with matters of actions, according to the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, not just according to a whole bunch of actions that is not according to the way the Prophet ﷺ. So whoever his actions is slowing him down more, following his desires and sinful and things like this, لَمْ يُسْرِعْ بِهِ نَسَبُ, his lineage would not get him ahead. He's from that great lineage, from the family of the Prophet ﷺ, his father, his grandfather, great alim, someone this or that. This nasab is not going to benefit him if his own actions is not getting him ahead. So, and it become a statement to be applied at all times. So, when أبطأ به عمله لم يسرع به نسبه. Whoever his actions slow them down, his nasab, his lineage, would not get him ahead. The same hadith, but also حدثنا الفريابي أيضا قال أخبرنا أبو بكر بن أبي شيبة عن أبي صالح عن أبي هريرة قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ما اجتمع قوم في بيت من بيوت الله عز وجل. Every time people gathered in the house of Allah, يتلون كتاب الله, they recite the book of Allah, ويتدارسونه بينهم, and they're studying it among themselves, إلا نزلت عليهم السكينة. Here the sakina is mentioned. The sakina, tranquility, comes down onto them. وغشيتهم الرحمة, and the rahmah, the mercy, covers them. وحفت بهم الملائكة, and the angels surrounds them. وذكرهم الله في من عنده, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned them with the best gathering with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is if we want sakina in our homes, and if we want every goodness in our life, we have to establish these acts of obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to have a share always in gatherings of knowledge in the masajid, and to work to establish this to the best of our ability. Then the last narration in the chapter, he says وحدثنا الفريابي قال أخبرنا من جاب بن الحارث قال أخبرنا أبو الأحوص عن هارون بن عنترة عن أبيه قال قلت لابن عامر, I said to Ibn Amr, أي العمل أفضل? What is the best action? He said, ذكر الله أكبر. The dhikr of Allah akbar is the greatest thing, quoting part of the verse. وَلَذِكْرُ اللَّهِ أكبر. وَمَا, and the dhikr of Allah involves every act of ibadah. And then he says, وَمَا جَلَسَ قَوْمٌ فِي بَيْتٍ مِّن بُيُوتِ اللَّهِ. And there's no people that would sit in the house, one of the houses of Allah. يَدْرُسُونَ فِيهِ كِتَابَ اللَّهِ. They study in it the book of Allah. وَيَتَعَاطُونَهُ بَيْنَهُمْ. يَتَعَاطُونَهُ بَيْنَهُم, that means they go back and forth with one another to learn the book of Allah. إِلَّا أَظَلَّتْهُمُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ بِأَجْنِحَتِهَا. More of the meaning of حَفَّتْهُمُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ, unless the angels would shade them with their wings. The angels would shade them with their wings, with all what that beautifully means. وَكَانُوا أَضْيَافَ اللَّهِ مَا دَامُوا فِيهِ حَتَّى يَخُوضُوا فِي حَدِيثٍ غَيْرِهِ. And they become أضياف Allah, the guests of Allah, as long as they are in that learning session, حَتَّى يَخُوضُوا فِي حَدِيثٍ غَيْرِهِ, till they indulge in some other speech. So, and if a person is the guest of Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most generous, and the best generosity is for the hearts to change, for a person to be firm upon the deen of Allah. So, hearing this and the virtues of what's mentioned before, then this is definitely something that we need to to be doing, even if with the lack of knowledge or the less of knowledge that we have, but the role of the masjid should never be undermined. Um, and we should use the other means as a way to add or fix the mistake or the deficiencies that we have. And whoever learned the deen because this is the only means that they have, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bless it for them. And to increase of one's action and to put more efforts and to seek help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to be attached to the people of knowledge, this is something that a person can get the same reward because of the lack of presence of many benefits that we can have. And that's why even from a distance, this is something that is benefiting if it's done in the right way, as long also as the role of the masjid is given with the daily basis, and this is what needs to be done. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the proper understanding and make us among the people of the Qur'an. And if you go through these narrations again and read them and reflect upon them, it's best before we get to the next chapter, because this is such a beautiful one that he talks about the akhlaq or the manners of the people of the Qur'an, that is basically a lifetime actions based on the Qur'an and the Sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Not sure if there's any questions here. تفضل. With regards to the youth in Ramadan, after they finish the Salat al-Tarawih and they go to a gym somewhere and they play or so till later part of the night, or maybe till right before suhoor, and they, mashallah, come back and make suhoor, and then and with the mujahada, wallahi, these things is one of the things that we have to look at it in a very fair way. People are different, and that's why if someone, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestowed the favor upon him that he has some control of himself and he's righteous and obedient to Allah, definitely don't distract yourself in the month of Ramadan with anything, even if you're young. Just 30 days, and even though with that your body has a right on you. وَإِنَّ لِبَدَنِكَ عَلَيْكَ حَقًّا. Your body has a right on you. So even to have some sporting activities with that intention, even in Ramadan, there's no harm in this. But not to waste so much, especially when people are together. And this is the other level of people. Some people, they only show up in Ramadan, or this is the first time for them to come to the masjid. So this is good for them, because they may be in a better environment than the environment that they were in before. So this can be a step for them to be close to the masjid and to be close to the deen and so on. But at the same time, this can be a step further away for others. So a person should be careful not to put himself or to lose from the iman versus someone that would gain some. And if a program is done for those who are away from the masjid, and something like this is done, of course, without sins, without disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for a period of time that doesn't make them, for example, oversleep and do not pray Fajr, then we're responsible in that case. Or to make it just a month of fun, as in many parts of the world, the nights of Ramadan is just a blast for many people. Food and parties and things like this, when it's supposed to be the nights is nights of mujahada with the Qur'an to the best of one's ability, and it's only counted days, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, ayaman ma'dudat. So if a person can avoid all of that, this is what is perfectly the means that a person should stay away from that, especially with the nights of Ramadan. And if someone else, we should not discourage them if this is a mean for them to come closer to the deen of Allah. And also at the same time, I wanted to mention that as the ulama, they say clearly, the fun gatherings is not da'wah. This is not da'wah to the deen. When you put the word da'wah, this is da'wah to the people. No, the da'wah is قال Allah, قال Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Sporting activities, if it's done in a halal way, this is a good thing. Nobody can doubt that, right? And do it, mashallah. But the da'wah is the actual saying, Allah says this, the Prophet ﷺ said that, the deen part. So if you take that as a step to bring them, because that would get them together, and then you take them from that to you teach them the deen or things like this, mashallah, this is good. No problem in this whatsoever. But to make this is the da'wah, and that's it, you will complain, they go. Come play and go, then this can have even a negative effect on them. So to put it in that perspective and to be always focused on that, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept. I'm not sure if this is a clear answer, but it depends on the people. And we're living at times where the rifq and gentleness should be the norm of the person. And anything of means of goodness, we should try to take advantage of that and not to repel people away from the masjid or the goodness that they need to observe.
Sunnah sport,
No.
Sunnah sport.
Sunnah sport. Oh, mashallah. And of course, I mean, the Prophet ﷺ and the companions would do things, and the Prophet ﷺ would even order the companions, alaykum bin nasalan, which is like jogging or walk fast. When they complained of being tired or lazy or so, the Prophet ﷺ encouraged them to do so. But to put things in the right perspective, of course. And for example, if someone says then the last 10 nights of Ramadan, in I'tikaf, we have 2 hours of sporting activities in the masjid. That's against what 10 days, it's the time for ibadah and nothing but ibadah. And if you make the month of Ramadan to the best, if you are like this, you can strive with yourself according to the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ in the best way in the month of Ramadan, then you'll have everything in the right perspective after the month of Ramadan. The sports will have its right portion of time for you without transgressing other things, and things like that will come as a benefit. And this is in any aspects of life. People, they need to have that full attention to whatever they're doing. Whether they get hired first in a job or something, the first few weeks is just intense, and then after that things fall into the norm. So this is a month that is blessed with acts of worship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There was a question here. عليكم السلام ورحمة الله. ما فائدة أن يذكرك الله في من عنده? I guess what's the significance or what's the benefit that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions you with those who are with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ubay ibn Ka'b radiallahu anhu, when the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he said to him that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned him because of his recitation of the Qur'an. So when he heard this, he started weeping. And he said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned me? He says, yes. So is there any of a greater benefit than this? As far as the rewards, first of all, he's mentioned, that means he's mentioned. Because we have to be also careful. Some of the distorted ways of belief, they say it doesn't mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned that person in the best gathering. It means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would reward that person. MashaAllah. You change the words of the hadith because it fits your distorted belief. And that's the problem with having a distorted and a deviant belief, and then you start explaining the Qur'an and the hadith according to the distorted belief. Because they deny the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for example, speak, wal'adhu billah, or some of the attributes of Allah, and this is a dangerous thing. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned that person, and mentioned these people, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is able to do all things, and nothing is the like of Allah, to the best gatherings, which is the gatherings of the angels. As far as the rewards is concerned, this is something else. It does not mean the reward. It means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions them. And if they are mentioned, that means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased with them. That means they would get a great reward from Allah that we cannot even comprehend the amount of reward but it doesn't mean the rewards. It means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would mention their name, as the hadith says, and nothing is the like of Allah. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. So if the concern is about the rewards is even beyond what our imagination is. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will mention someone in the best gathering, and as the hadith, مَنْ صَلَّى عَلَيَّ مَرَّةً صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ عَلَيْهِ بِهَا عَشْرًا, whoever makes salah on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam one time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make salah on that person 10 times. The salah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to someone means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would praise that person. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praise someone, that means the reward are beyond what we can ever think. And that means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased with the person. And the highest reward that people get in Jannah is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would say to them, رَضِيتُ عَلَيْكُمْ, or so I'm pleased with you. فَلَا أَسْخَطُ عَلَيْكُمْ أَبَدًا, I would never be angry with you. So the highest level of reward in Jannah with seeing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased with them. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made for the believers in this life the reward that they would be rewarded with in Jannah, and that is for them to be among those who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased with. And if someone knows for sure, and that's why the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, they received that in their lifetime, if someone knows that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased with him, he is getting some of what the people of Jannah would feel in Jannah. But we don't know that because it's unseen to us. And that's why the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was pleased with them. So this is all means of pleasure from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. In the book of Akhlaq Ahl Qur'an by Imam Al-Ajurri, same as Akhlaq Hamalatul Qur'an, yes, it's the same book. It's a chapter of part of the book of Kitab al-Sharia by Imam Al-Ajurri. So they took it as a separate one, or it's a separate book. That's why the title of it might be different, either Akhlaq Ahl Qur'an or Akhlaq Hamalatul Qur'an. Anything else, inshallah? Inshallah, the next chapter, which is tomorrow, it's amazing how he, rahimahullah, he puts it together with these akhlaq. It's a beautiful chapter. Just reading it, it might take some time without even going through the details of it or the explanation of it. But every sentence of it is like a subject and a title for us to learn these akhlaq, and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put barakah in their words as a result of the importance of the Qur'an in their lives. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وصحبه وسلم. الله يبارك فيكم.